Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí a esta hora tan temprana de la mañana para escuchar las maravillosas ponencias que van a hacer FARSHID Moussavi y Belinda Tato. Ellas van a explicar su obra y el impacto que tienen sus edificios en la ciudad. Después de una jornada tan hermosa como tuvimos ayer con las ponencias de escritores que nos narran con palabras maravillosas cómo es la ciudad o cómo debe ser la ciudad. Después también de participaciones tan interesantes como la de mi alcaldesa de Madrid, Manuela Carmena, cómo debe ser o cómo se debe gestionar la ciudad desde el punto de vista social, desde el punto de vista organizativo. Tenemos ahora mismo la oportunidad de escuchar a dos arquitectas en ejercicio de la profesión que nos van a hablar de sus proyectos. Yo creo que esto es especialmente interesante en el Congreso, que hablamos de ciudad, como decía la alcaldesa, mejor arquitectura, más ciudad, quizá, o era Clos quien lo dijo ayer, ¿no? Mejor arquitectura, pues ellas van a explicar esta mejor arquitectura. Tienen varias cosas en común FARSHID y Belinda. Una de ellas es que ambas son además profesoras en Harvard, están acostumbradas también a enseñar, a transmitir todo aquello que los arquitectos y arquitectas debemos saber para llevar a la realidad los hermosos pensamientos que otros tienen sobre los espacios de habitar, en este caso sobre la ciudad. Esta es una de las cosas que tienen en común. FARSHID es iraní, nació en Irán y su oficina la tiene establecida en Londres. Belinda es de Madrid y además de tener su oficina Ecosistemas Urbanos establecida en Madrid, ahora mismo tiene oficina también en Estados Unidos. También hay otra cosa entonces que une a ambas arquitectas y es que están acostumbradas a trabajar en el extranjero y a mirar con una mirada amplia todo lo que sucede a su alrededor. Entonces yo creo que lo mejor es que empecemos ya con FARSHID. FARSHID, you are going to start now. Ella va a explicar los proyectos en inglés y posteriormente también el debate será en inglés. Afterwards we'll have our dialogue in English, so it will be easier for you. Pero creo que como todos tienen traducción simultánea no habrá ningún problema. Lo importante es que nos sentamos cómodos y que sepamos cómo un arquitecto es capaz de construir en la ciudad. Gracias.
Well, thank you for waking up so early morning to be here listening to us, and thank you for inviting me to be part of the discussion. I didn't know I would see myself up there. So I thought that the title, Less Architecture, More City, was very provocative. My initial thought was, well, what do you mean? You know, how can you have the city if you have no architecture? But I think it's a great question. So maybe we can we not switch me off and just have my slide? I would like my slide big. Can we do that? Switch me off, because I would like to see my slides very big. So I think let's unpack the subtitle of this session, which was called The City as a Project. So the city is made out of, you know, open spaces between buildings, but also buildings that are, you know, more and more built and shaped, envisioned by the private sector, not by the public sector. And then there are, of course, all the people who come there with all kinds of different desires and wishes to do different things in the city. And I think where the challenge really is where architecture can somehow influence and orientate those buildings that are shaping the city through private investment for the benefit of the public. I think that's where, if you like, the project lies. So we have planned public spaces in the city, which are publicly funded. I would say those are the ones that, they are not, we need more of them, of course, and we are investing in less of them. But I think for an architect, that's not where I can kind of talk about the challenges. These are examples of our publicly funded public spaces, streets and, plazas, parks. This is the Barcelona park that we worked on some years ago as part of Foreign Office Architects. But, we find public spaces in buildings. So the Tate Modern Turbine Hall is also a kind of a space for the public, publicly funded also, or mostly. I would say the Pantheon is also a kind of a public space. Again, it's not about buildings as opposed to the open space, which is sort of public space. I think buildings incorporate and provide space for the public. The Yokohama Ferry Terminal, which we designed a number of years ago, is another public project where we added a huge kind of, let's say, public space to it, which was not the primary or core function of the building. And, through the way it was designed as a series of floors that would kind of branch off of each other, it would create a kind of a meandering space and encourage people to not simply pass through the terminal, but stop and use it as a kind of a space where they would encounter each other and do other things than just the core function of the terminal for traveling to other places. But these are, even though this project was not in any way easy because of the design of it, I would say in terms of its kind of the foundation of introducing this component, it was much easier than in private projects, in my experience, because here we were working for the public sector. We were working for the Port and Harbor Bureau, we were working for the central government, and so of course they were invested and very interested in this new component that we were introducing to the project. Now, there are unplanned public spaces that people find in the city, and they're often, again, inside of architecture, buildings, I would say. So this is the undercraft or the ground floor of the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank by Foster and Partners. The lobby is not closed, it's simply covered at street level. That's the lobby mode at the top. And below is the same space. Every Sunday becomes a venue for Filipino women to picnic, and it's a huge gathering, and it's a regular event that happens, and it's a building that has created the possibility of this kind of event. We've had recently Starbucks in America. As you may have heard, there was this incident where someone was kicked out because of whatever reason, and following that, now Starbucks have changed their policy, and all Starbucks are open to anyone to sit for as long as they want and do whatever they want and not buy anything from them. I would say Starbucks is a new kind of space for the public. And I think these photographs are interesting to also remind ourselves that making public space is not simply to go and have leisure and to sit and do nothing. That space for the public includes, providing opportunities where people work, people meet, people shop, people view exhibitions, and that's what the city is about. That's why people go to the city, and that's where I think the relevance of architecture lies as part of the construction of the city, in the way it produces all kinds of platforms for being a citizen. There have been strategically planned public spaces inside private buildings, privately financed building, going back a very long time. The Galleria in Milan has a kind of a public route through it. Of course, there are other kind of motives in getting people perhaps to shop for longer on the cover. The Southdale shopping mall that really started the whole kind of development of shopping malls in America is another one. The John Portman hotels are, of course, again, you can stroll in them, you can be in them, you don't have to stay in a room, you don't have to buy a coffee. One of my favorite examples is 590 Madison Avenue in New York. This is one example of many, many buildings where the city of New York allowed developers to build taller in return for providing publicly accessible private spaces. And these are, some of them are 24-hour open, some of them are less, and they have more or less regulation to them. The Occupy movement, the recent kind of uprising, let's say, that happened in Wall Street, really profited from this network of publicly accessible private spaces that now populate the ground floor, sometimes a level below and above as well. We've had a kind of various opportunities of introducing these kind of spaces inside projects that we were asked to work on. A shopping mall on the eastern side of Istanbul, where we introduced a public square right in the middle. So this was supposed to be an indoor shopping mall. And as you see, there is a public square that has become very much part of the city and part of how the development works, outside of the hours of shopping. And it provides a new platform and a new possibility for people to gather and do different things. We are moving to privately funded projects, where I think really the challenge lies and where you need more architecture. We were asked also a number of years ago to work on, to be part of a redevelopment of the city of Leicester, retail-led. And what you see here as a chunk was supposed to be, seamless and fully connected with the rest of the mall. We came on board and we said, what if instead of the top section where the orange part was the covered route, just attaching the whole block to the rest of the mall, what if you open it and you only attach it where the route is and create a street? So this, I don't think people would realize this was a kind of an architect's proposal, but I'm proud that I made this street in the city of kind of Leicester. It brings other desires to this development. It makes the development active, during times when the shopping mall closes. It's a new street in Leicester. Now, it becomes harder and harder when you don't have the larger scale to deal with, where you can introduce the square or you can introduce the street. So when faced with a department store, as we walked this morning here, I looked at El Corte Inglés opposite and I said to my kind of colleagues as we were walking in, is this a car park? Well, that's what, you see another El Corte Inglés, and it's not just El Corte Inglés I'm picking at. It's these buildings that actually look back at the city, and where shopping in them is like shopping like anywhere else. So we questioned this in Leicester, and we said, well, when you shop, you want to know where you are, and gone the days when you want to be trapped, so that you shop until drop. We do want to be connected to the weather, to the city, and to know, to kind of be empowered with the possibility to leave. So we proposed to kind of introduce to the department store an envelope which is semi-transparent. It has 2 layers of glass with a pattern frit onto the glass that produces a kind of a moire pattern and gives the department store the privacy that its clutter doesn't project onto the street, which is what they would be worried about. So that, and on the inside, instead of this typical situation, we then get this situation where you have views of the city, you have daylight. It's let's say, contribution to the public is at a different scale, but I think it is absolutely to do with people's experience of everyday life in the city. Now, a museum, a private museum in America, where, as you know, the minute you go in, you need to pay. And that makes the building exclusive, not inclusive. Not everybody can enter. So here we said, well, how can we contribute? Where can architecture influence this private museum to kind of open up and be more inclusive? So one of the first decisions we made was take the triangular site and say, rather than cover the whole site, we make a 4-story building to generate a public plaza so that people who would not enter the museum could interact and engage with museum activities that would spill outdoors, as you see here. The next decision, which we often judge buildings, again, their publicness by the kind of the open space that they have. Well, I think this building has a kind of a radical, I would claim, aspect, which is that we said we would put the paid gallery on the 4th floor, which means that the 3 levels below you can come in and use without paying a ticket. So we shifted the point where you buy the ticket to the 4th floor. And that, I think, makes the building far more inclusive. The next thing we did was to take the stair. This stair, you would never see it. I've taken two of the kind of faces of the building away to show you this. It's a big stair, and there is a lot at stake in this stair. It's a double-decker stair. We put one of the fire stairs underneath the public stair to double the number of ways that people could go up. We also turned the fire escape, which is in this yellow route, into a sound gallery so that people who would not be paying to go to the top floor gallery would experience art of a different kind, since contemporary art comes in all kinds of forms and scales. So we try to spill the art out so that it would kind of, if you like, hit the people outside of the main gallery. Now the top floor, the top stair is a kind of a social stair. The interesting extra feature of this stair is that we extended, this is the top floor paid gallery, we extended the stair above this so that people who would not be paying to see the gallery by entering could actually view it from the top. So you see here the stair and that view over to the main gallery. Of course, it's for everyone. It's also exhibitions when they are being set up, the paid gallery is closed, and to be able to see them from above during construction is a kind of a new experience that the stair provides. Now, on the outside, the building, in a way, is not so dissimilar to a department store where it wants to be inward-looking. It's a contemporary art museum. It doesn't have a collection. It needs to be flexible. There are not a lot of windows as a result. And the question is, how does it engage with the city? How do we define, as architects, the threshold between the inside and the outside? And can we speak, if you like, to the city rather than turn away? So the exterior cladding is in a kind of a black mirror stainless steel that, together with the shape of the building, generates different colors, different kind of shapes, depending on where you view the building from. There are 4 apexes of the building that point your kind of head towards the sky, and there are 4 of them that point towards the ground, and they engage you. And I think that the city is also about these kinds of moments where, your head goes up to the sky and it goes to the ground, and where it kind of sparks moments of reflection. Now, the stainless steel panels are, there's a kind of oil canning that we've introduced to the panels, as you see better on the right, and so they refract what gets projected onto them. And they play with the scenery around, with the moving scenery, clouds, people, cars, and so the building changes as what's around it also kind of changes. It also throws light onto the pavement in these hoops of light, and if you like, extends or produces a new landscape between the hard pavement and the hard building. Something new, a third thing happens as a result. And I think these are also part of our experiences of the city. The window reveals are clad in mirror stainless steel. They displace what is lateral, they bring it frontal, and they bring it into the gallery. And so when you're looking out from the galleries, you are seeing a new kind of landscape that doesn't actually exist in reality in that specific configuration, but it is produced between the urban scape outside and the building inside. Light enters through the window jambs also, and kind of new kind of relationships are set up, created throughout the day. I think these are part of our experiences, or can be, in, for example, going to a museum. Now, what happens when we're designing a kind of a residential building? Where does the city stop? Where does it start? Who are we designing for? I think when it comes to the private sector developing housing, it has, which is in London and in many cities now in America, it's mostly the case. What we forget are the people we are actually designing for. So let's remind ourselves of some of the different kinds of household that we should be designing for today. So here is Miriam. She's 20 years old. She's a single mother and relies on her friends for childcare. This is a trainee midwife who has a son, lives with 6 other adults in a co-living setup. This is Janet and Margaret, emotionally dependent on each other. They usually share a bedroom, but neither would call themselves a lesbian. They regularly host Bible study groups at their flat. Vernon sublets with his boyfriend from another couple. They eat out all the time. They hardly ever use their kitchen. Abdul is a kitchen porter, rents the smallest of 4 bedrooms in an illegally sublet council property to make some extra money. He repairs phones in his bedroom. David is a medicine student, runs a mixed-sex scout group in his neighborhood, which meets in the park because there is not any shared facilities in his housing block. Seb is a grandfather of 2, runs a yoga studio in his house, or flat, I would say, and as he feels lonely in the evenings, he's the first to propose neighborhood parties. This is probably a more typical household that most private housing developments design for, with a nanny and a cleaner. This is Petrie, a fan of communal living arrangements, who rents different rooms, and every time one goes, there is Airbnb that has helped her recently to fill up the vacant room. Patrick and Patience live with 8 children. They're in a 3-bedroom flat. Their oldest daughter wants to go to university but cannot because she needs to stay behind to help her mother raise younger siblings. So these show the plethora of household types that we have today, and this is what we need to design for, and this is where we architects need to champion a different kind of thinking about the city and about the residential buildings in the city, so that we cater for the different desires and needs of people who come to want to be in the city, but are also very, very different. Now, if we look at these images, this is why people come to the city, and to be together, all these different people, and they are together during the day when they work and when they socialize. But this is what happens when we design housing. So we design housing for for luxury kind of level. We design social housing, we design student housing, and we segregate people into different kinds of buildings, and which then reciprocates in different sectors or regions of the city. So people get segregated. So they come to the city to be together, but they find themselves segregated when it comes to recent housing. And in the cases where we have policies, when we are supposed to somehow introduce one into the other, we are failing we are failing them, because we put one next to each other, but in the way that least actually produces any kind of equity, let's say, or any idea that they are actually equal. So there is, I think, hope in what people are actually doing themselves. If you look at neighborhood apps where they reach out to each other, where they do things for each other, because they recognize that our differences are also our strengths. So how do we bring these into a building? When we recently worked on a project in Paris on this kind of red spot that you see here, this is our kind of composition of residents, students, affordable housing, social housing, and there is only the top level that is sold at market rate. Now, this is, of course, not the decision of the architect. We were blessed with this kind of brief, given that the mayor of Nanterre is a communist. Now, the experience of these, the question is then, how do we express, and what kind of structure do we provide? What is at stake when you bring people so close to each other? And what's the relationship to their kind of urban context? Now, usually a kind of a long slab, you would have the corridor, the kind of the modernist kind of block, dreamt of these streets in the sky that frankly kind of failed. And are failing even more today because people very different would live next to each other and would share this street. And the question is whether, that's the moment where you want to encourage people to become friends or whether they should be given the choice of doing that somewhere else. It brings all kinds of problems, the corridor, of the tensions that it brings between kind of neighbors that would live very differently. Now, today, it's becoming even more acute as we have Airbnb, being another kind of function of these residential blocks. These are realities of the city that we need to take into account when we are, in our kind of offices drawing the perfect kind of layout. This is what people, experience. Where, I won't read it to you. So we said, let's get rid of the corridor. So here we've arranged the kind of the slab in a way that every 2 units share a small landing and core, so that they would be a little bit like, they would have a lot of privacy, and they would have, of course, double aspect, etc. The next way to empower this kind of diverse residents to configure their units as they want was to where the location of the structure. So what you see black is the structure, what you see red is non-load bearing, so that people could knock down walls if they want an extra, one less bedroom, or they would put up a wall if they, their teenage kind of son or daughter would come back to live with them, and so on. So they are highly reconfigurable. You get these double aspect units. And what you also get is the possibility of having outdoor space at both ends. Let's not forget that people who come to live into the city is to have those extra possibilities that the city gives you, but what they lose is space and privacy and the possibility to have, for example, gardens. So here we said, if we shift the shape, frankly, it's not the floor plates, it's the shape of the floor plates slightly 2 degrees along the length. We make one shade the other, but we also create 2 different kinds of outdoor space at either end, like a kind of a back garden and a front garden, that are also, because of the shifting nature of the floors, they are varying in scale. So suddenly, the original brief that was just to provide a 2, 3, and 4 bedroom suddenly become an array of different apartment choices that you could have, you could choose from. So choice, I think, is something that people would want in such buildings, something that they rarely ever do have. Something that when you go to luxury houses, we spend forever trying to find the house that we like because we want to have that choice. And we too easily give it up when we are designing multi-story residential building. So then the next thing was how to express these residents, and we picked all the elements that would be visible in the urban context, which are colored, and we said we are going to treat them exactly the same, whether it's a student or whether it's a social housing block, etc. There are simple elements that architects deal with, it's screens and it's floor slabs and it's handrails, but there is, again, I think, a lot at stake. We chose materials that are long enduring, that require little maintenance, because when you buy an apartment or a flat, the last thing you want is the heavy burden of lots of maintenance bills every 4 years or so. So this is a building that I think will not burden people as often. Now, then there are the two sides. I won't go too much into detail, but on one side, what we call the loggias give people screens, sliding screens that they can kind of open or close, so that the loggias can either feel more part of the urban context or be more closed and be more private, and therefore you will do different things on this side of your apartment. The dividing walls between neighbors are glass with a kind of a mirror-backed film, so that the city comes in, so that you don't have to kind of put your head out to be part of the urban context. And in fact, every single apartment has a unique view of the city, because the projection of that it receives of the outside is totally unique at that point. Then there are the solid walls that you see in darker colors that are part of the load-bearing structure, and they too participate in this kind of dialogue between the building and the context. And we have also clad them with glass mirror-backed film, so that, if you like, the solid melts into reflections of the context. So here it is, if they would be solid, and that. So the budget for this building was not high, and so you will see that the frames are thick. We don't have sliding doors because we couldn't afford them. But I think there are still lots of choices within those that one can make that do make a difference in terms of your experience of living at this point of the city in this building. The balconies, contrary to the loggias, are designed to be extremely open, like a front garden. So the handrails are glass. There are 3 scenarios where people have less or more privacy. So if you want to be more sociable, if you are perhaps in a co-living situation, you might want the right one, where the neighbor above can see you and vice versa, whereas the others give you more privacy. These two, again, have those dividing walls that I showed you that are not kind of solid. This is the triple height balcony, and this is the student. So you see that the student is treated exactly the same way. And in fact, I remember when the mayor came to visit the building just before opening, he said, but the students are never going to want to leave. So I don't think that we didn't make the space larger. I think we made a difference to that space through the way we treated it, and through the way we treated it, equally to the rest of the residents in the building. This is the handrail seen through the apartment interior. You see there's a little frit there just to kind of let you know that there is a handrail there, but this frit soon disappears as it rises to the top of the handrail, so that light can reach plants if you choose to use your balcony to keep plants, which is one of the uses we have of our balconies. Again, this is not about grand gesture. It's not about creating the plaza, but this is a way to make a difference to people's experience of the city. So, we see that different kinds of residents already in the first week were in the building. Maybe this is a kind of a businessman. Clearly he's on the move, but he's also busy continuing to work. This is a small family with their daughter. This is clearly a work-live situation. During a move, this person is having to also carry on working, a student. A more typical family where it was very important for them to sit down and have lunch, and that's during the move, and they set up the table on the balcony before they furnish the interior. A kind of an example of the significance of doing a small shift in the shape of the floor plate allows this resident to look at the grand arch and look at the grand axe without having to bend out. And the amount of, no matter what the architect does, of course, you only start the beginning and you don't really determine how people are going to live there. We put wood on the floor of the balconies thinking that it would be appreciated. It was covered by astroturf, as you see here on to the right. So I think the building is unique because it's very urban. You see, this is one moment where you're standing on the loggia at one end of the balcony and you're looking through the apartment to the other side, to your balcony. So they're very urban, but they're very private. And the life can pour out to the outside, and yet, you know, people who are so different can live together next to each other. We have designed extra larger, if you like, lobbies with fixed furniture so that if people choose to become friends, they can do so in the lobby. I think I will leave this at this point. Thank you.